Right, here we are. We are ready to paint the snowdrop that we've already drawn in Snowdrop 1. So as you remember, I drew it in and then used the putty eraser to get rid of most of the heavy pencil marks. Hopefully you can still just about see it, which is good enough. Now the colours that I've got mixed here are some very weak lemon yellow. I've got a very weak ultramarine blue, a very weak Payne's grey, and a very weak sap green. Now when I say weak, I haven't mixed up lots of paint, but proportionately there's a lot of water to it. If I show you on this little bit of card here, this is how pale my yellow really is. So if I put another layer on, so you can see it's not very thick. The same with the green. I don't want this to be too heavy. These colours are going to blend and blur together. So here's the blue. And the grey equally is very pale because I don't want anything too sharp on here. So we just want to get a little bit of tones on there. So that's how weak my colour is, but you don't need tons of it. You're only going to be using a small amount. So we're going to start. I'm going to start with the petals at the top. Now it may be with this picture that you're going to have to jump from one thing to another, because it might well be that you do not want to get the top running into each other. So I'm going to start and I'm going to just touch some water, keep your tissue to hand, onto this middle petal, the main petal of the flower, and then just touch in a little bit of the grey. And this will just bleed down. Because I put some water on, it will bleed along, and I'm just putting slightly more onto what is the right hand side, and then softening it over to the left. You do want some colour on this, because although it's white, if you've just got white on white paper, you can't really see anything. Again, I'm going to go in and I'm just darkening along that side just a little bit, not too much, because this is in the front, so I want it to be lighter than what's at the back. Now, because I'm working with a relatively dry brush, and although the paint is weak, I'm not loading the brush with tons of it. Touch it off on your tissue, and then I'm going in onto this other petal, and I'm just leaving a small slither where these two meet, and that allows me to control it. So I've got that on, going back in again, fairly dry, and just to the back of this petal I'm putting in another layer of that grey. Again, I'm just leaving a very small slither between this petal and the front one. As soon as it's dry enough, you can push it into that area if you want to. This petal, again, loading up. And this is going to be, my right hand side is going to be my darker side, so I'm going in with a little bit of the grey, and then a little bit slightly darker. Again, you can leave a small slither if you're worried about the colours running from one petal to the other. Just leave a smaller area. And then I'm going to leave this and just let it dry. Pull that right up to the edge. Before I move on, I want to get a little bit more dark just up here underneath that cap, because that clearly is going to create a little bit of shadow, and then we'll leave it. So the next thing I'm going to do is come and do the top. So I'm going into that with some of my weak lemon yellow. Again, don't have your brush wet. If you must go into the water between colours, A lot of the time you don't really need to, but if you must, then make sure you take the excess water off your brush so that it doesn't run riot. So I'm just going to put that in. I'm going to do this little bit at the top, which I did know what it was called, but now I've forgotten. So you can always go and have a little look. And I'm going to start on the stem. And then I'm just going to bring this right down to where it joins that leaf. Straight away I'm going and picking up some sap green. Haven't cleaned my brush. And I'm just going to allow that sap green to bleed around a little bit. Picking it up and taking it up onto the stem. And just pulling it down. And because the lemon yellow is still slightly wet, and these colours will bleed a little bit. And now I'm picking up a very small amount of the ultramarine blue, and I'm dropping that in on this side. I don't want anything too drastic. This is a nice, delicate looking picture. So I'm just dropping some in on that side, a little bit on the underside there, even a little bit on there. And then I'm bringing it down. And this is really helping to cover up the pencil line, and I'm just letting it fall off when it gets down to where it disappears into the leaf. So let's just strengthen this up a little tiny bit. And there, just because there would be a little bit of shadow on that bottom edge there. So we're going to let that dry and then come back to it. So I'm going on to my leaves now. So we've got this one that is pushing up right against that stem. So again, I'm starting with my lemon yellow, going in with my sap green. Don't forget, you may need to dry your brush off time and time again. And then straight away I'm picking up some of the ultramarine blue and dropping it along this one edge. So this is the edge that's going to be slightly darker. It will be a little bit darker at the bottom as well because it will be in shadow. So my second leaf I'm coming up to. So I'm just going to follow the shape. And then where I've got that twist, I'm virtually going to just lift off and move down to the bottom. So it just creates this nice impression. Straight in with the sap green. And then down here. And then straight away the ultramarine blue. Again, this will be darker towards the bottom here. And then I'm going to follow that edge to where it crosses over. And then go back onto the right hand side and just put a little bit of dark in. But this will just bleed together, soften away nicely. Do want a little bit more down there, I think. There we go. And as soon as we do this sort of thing, you can see that it suddenly becomes far more three-dimensional. Now this one is underneath here, so I'm not going to go in with the lemon yellow. I'm going to go straight in with the sap green. Ignore everything else that's there, they'll just blend together. So straight in with my sap green. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the ultramarine blue. Again, it's going to be darker at the bottom. And I'm extending this up because this is the darker side. I'm going to wipe off most of that paint and just encourage that to blend. So that leaf is now much darker than that one or that one. Let's move on to this side. So this first one up here, back to my lemon yellow. And then picking up my sap green. And you can see why it's better to not have heavy pencil lines, because even though those lines were very pale, I can still just about see them. So I'm going to just put some dark on the tip there because I've got the stem, and then the dark coming down the bottom here. I might just touch a little bit along that side. There we go. And then I've got this last one here. And for this one, I'm just going to go in with the sap green. To the fold and then at the bottom. And then I'm picking up the ultramarine. Don't be afraid, wipe your brush off, ultramarine, and then all the way down to the bottom here. I want it to be that little bit darker because this is where it's in shadow. So it's going to have a bit of shadow cast from there. And that's the darker edge anyway. So again, I'm just going to encourage it to blend a little bit while it's wet. And I'm going to leave that area there nice and bright. So we've got that far. What else can we do to the bottom? Well, you want to put some sort of shadow or something underneath it to fix it. So I'm just going in with a little bit of the ultramarine. Putting it underneath, and then I'll throw a little bit of sap green on top of that just to green it down. I can open my brush, and by that what I'm actually doing, if I move this here for a second, is I'm actually just hitting the brush down into the paint. There's very little water in this, so I'm hitting it open. When I've separated the bristles like this, then I can create this impression. So here we go, slapping it open. I've got my bristles all open now. And then I'm just going to pull a few little pulls of grass, just little points of interest really. So it looks like there's some other things going on around here. Pulling it out of that grass, a little bit darker. So here we go. And it's much easier than trying to create individual grasses. So it just gives that little look that something might be going on down here. You can use browns, especially with the snowdrops this time of year. They're only just getting to grips with the ground, and around here it's been very wet this year, so there's a lot of mud. So I'm changing now to a 00 brush, which is basically a very fine tipped brush. I'm just going to pick up a very small amount of the weak ultramarine blue, and I'm coming back up here. I'm catching underneath the edge. So I don't want a lot of paint on my brush, so make sure it's not too wet. I just want to catch underneath that edge, so I'm creating a slightly more noticeable shadow. I'm going to pull some of those little bits down here, just to create that separation. Same on this side, so I'm catching up onto where I've just put that shadowing up there. Pulling a little bit down. Don't forget this is our slightly darker side on the right here. So I'm just pulling a few little bits down, and then in the middle one, And I'm just going to give them a little tiny bit of shape. So I'm emphasizing the shape of that petal, and I'm going to pull a few little curved marks up from the bottom. And there we have it. You can, if you want, you can go in and put in some lines on the leaves. So here I'm going to come up to the fold and then lift off and then bring it up to the top. This one, I bring it slightly down from here. But honestly, you don't really need to do that. But if you want to, no reason why you shouldn't. And there we go. You could go back in and add other layers on top of this if you wanted to. But in all honesty, I don't think you need to. That's it. That's it for this one. And don't forget, when you finish painting, regardless of what you think of your painting, sign it. Don't risk it. So put your name on, or your initial, or just a mark that you will recognize as your own. Good luck, enjoy it, and don't forget, painting's all about enjoyment, so have fun. Bye.